So we're here again.
Back again, absolutely. Yep.
Video number 4, I think. I'm starting to lose count already. But so the whole point of us getting together, as we talked about in other videos, is we want to do a series of short videos to try and help our partners understand some of the key aspects of iPECS Anywhere, all of which add together to make this a truly unique service in our marketplace. Now, I personally think one of the most important elements of this service is how we can manipulate number presentation. So the given term for this is transforms, I think, in the
there's a terminology we've adopted.
In your parlance, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So I kind of understand transforms, but obviously the point of this video is to help the viewers understand what transforms are about. So, David, can you give us a bit of a summary? What are transforms? Why are they there? Why did you guys put them into the service, and what's the benefit? What are they used for?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a mobile device.
Mm-hmm.
It's an extension of the UCAS platform.
Yeah.
Now, the UCAS platform ordinarily will be presenting out probably one or two numbers,
mm-hmm.
either a DDI number,
yeah.
or if you're doing an extension to extension call within your own group, you'll be presenting an extension number.
Mm-hmm.
With a mobile service, you get the extra element. You also have a mobile number involved in the process. Now, what that does, it gives you the flexibility of choice as to what number you present out to the outside world when you make a call. However, it also, on the flip side, puts some limitations in place. Now, the first and very most obvious limitation we have is around extension to extension calls. Now, one of the great things about the Anywhere product is the ability to pick up your phone and dial a 4-digit extension or a 3-digit extension for your colleague who works in another office, another building.
Yep. You
know it off by heart. Boom, boom, boom. You can put that call and it will connect through to that individual.
So I guess a good example there is a classic scenario. External salesperson, like the sales team we have here. You're out and about, you're in the car, appointment to appointment, you're driving on the motorway, you get a phone call.
Yep.
And then halfway through the phone call, it's like, you need to be speaking to my colleague in the office about that.
Yeah.
The person on the other end's like, can you transfer me? You're like, no, I can't, because I'm on Vodafone or EE.
Absolutely.
And I guess the point here is then we would, obviously we're not talking about how we do transfers in this video, but it's about being able to dial an extension, right, to be able to get back into the office.
Absolutely. And absolutely. And it's the ability to then say, okay, using the short code extensions, it's an extension of what people are familiar with. If you are in the office and the Anywhere product gives you the ability to extend that service away from the office, you want to be able to continue to use those features. And we know people sit at their desk phones and they'll, second nature, they'll pick up and they won't even look at the keypad and they'll dial a 4-digit extension because they know that's who they need to speak to. Now, that service is great on mobile, but it does present, a couple of inherent problems. The first one being is that mobile networks are regulated, and the regulation says that numbers that pass over the mobile networks have to be in a certain format, so they have to be in the E164 format.
Okay.
So if you make an extension call and you present your own 4-digit extension as your CLI, the mobile networks look at that and they don't really like it.
So I think this is something we discovered, but we kind of knew early on, but it proved to be something of a sticking point, I think it's fair to say, isn't it, in early sales? That,
absolutely.
So hang on a minute, I'm dialing Dave from the office, but he's just getting, was it unknown number or
withheld
number on the mobile?
Yeah.
So obviously we're selling this as a extension of iPECS Cloud, but if I'm dialing someone on their extension number and they don't know who's calling, it kind of
it sort of fell down a little bit there in the first iteration of the service. You're absolutely right, and what we looked at was, okay, well, what's the root cause of the problem? Right, we know the problem. It's regulated. They're simply not allowed to pass those numbers over their networks. Okay,
so that's I think that's a really important point that often gets missed. By the way, is that this is not a shortcoming necessarily of iPECS Anywhere and previous iterations. It is an absolute fundamental part of the mobile network that they cannot and will not transmit those short codes across the network.
That's exactly it. The EEs and the Vodafones of this world they're regulated.
Yeah.
Ofcom will give them just prescribed rules that they need to follow.
Yeah.
And one of the rule changes they put in 2018 is that the number that is presented as a CLI has to be A, in an E164 format, and B should be a number that can be dialed back.
Yeah, sure.
Now, as I said, we had this problem. We were making extension calls, we were presenting an extension as a CLI. It wasn't working. It was coming through withheld number, private number, and on odd occasions, simply not connecting the call.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, it's not a great endorsement for any service.
No, hey, use our great new mobile-based service, but it doesn't work.
But by the way, this doesn't work. So we went back to the drawing board, and our engineering guys very, very quickly sort of cottoned onto this, the most obvious of solutions, which is we went to Ofcom and we said, okay, Ofcom, give us our own prefix. Give us our own prefix of a number range that we can change and we can manipulate. And what you can do within the transforms menu in control panel is very, very easily go into the transforms menu, switch on the service, tell us the number of digits that you use in your extension code ranges. So whether it be 3 digits, I think all the way up to 6 digits. And when you make an extension for extension call, we will preface your extension number with our own range that we own.
So, for example, my extension here is 128. So what you're saying is we would add to the front of that a series of digits, which are the same for everybody.
Same for everybody,
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think one of the questions I've been asked by some of the partners is, do we have to purchase a number then? It's like, no, this is baked into the service.
Baked into the service, absolutely.
So if you're out and about and I'm at my desk and I from my phone dial your extension number, which is you on iPECS anywhere, presented to your mobile phone, you'll see digit 128 at the end of it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely. So I guess the education piece or the theory there is that you as a user of iPECS anywhere, we would encourage you to save that digit string against my contact record in your phone, so that rather than seeing a slightly confusing series of digits, which would take you a while to get used to, actually, if you've saved that already,
it'll bring your name up on your mobile phone.
And if you missed that call on your mobile phone and came back on, who's that? You would be able to dial that number, and it would then route that call back through to my extension.
Straight through to your extension. And I guess the other thing as well is that even if you don't have the individual's name saved in your device immediately, it'll be something that you do very, very quickly.
Yeah.
But the last 3 digits or the last 4 digits that display on the number as a CLI are your extension number.
Yeah, I guess the reason for that question is, that not everybody, in fact a lot of people I know, particularly in our office here, we're much more likely to know someone's name.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In terms of if we're dialing, you do eventually learn extension numbers, but particularly in a bigger organisation, you're probably more likely to go through a directory and dial by name. But so that's, as I understand it, that's one of the ways that we can manipulate or transform.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are other options available.
Yeah. So talk us through some of the other options that are available then. So that's what we would call the default transfer, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But there's 2 others, isn't there? Something to do with ranges and then DDI. What's
the very other obvious option is that when you provision an iPECS Anywhere SIM, it's provisioned against a mobile number. That might not be the mobile number that you wish to present as your outbound calls. You may choose to actually say, you know what, I want to present a DDI. Now that DDI might be associated with your desk phone. Equally, it might be associated with the switchboard of your business. So when you present an outbound call to an individual, they'll either recognise it as your business name and they'll pick up the phone and they'll say hello. Or if they don't, if they come to dial that number back, it will go through to a switchboard and they'll say, okay, right, now I know who's called me. So you have that ability to control the outbound CLI. Now, obviously you change the outbound CLI, there are certain limitations in that.
So just to be clear, when we're talking about outbound CLI, so I know that most of our partners who would see this video, when we're talking about outbound CLI, they would be used to, say if they're setting me up as a new subscriber on iPECS Cloud, we would manage the CLI that's presented as a user from cloud. But to be clear here, we're talking about outbound CLI with regards to internal calls, right? And so what I'm seeing presented to me as an iPECS Anywhere subscriber from within the office.
So you've seen that in both elements.
Right.
So if you make that change and to say, okay, we want to present a switchboard number, in that circumstance, you would then make an outbound call to one of your colleagues who works for, one of your customers who works for an entirely different business. They would see your DDI presented, and if they call that number back, it would route through to your switchboard.
Yeah.
The default transform piece that we talked about earlier, those two would sit side by side. So if you do an extension to extension call, we'd identify it as an extension to extension call, and we would preface the number as we discussed previously. So those two things would sit side by side in that circumstance. You'd still be able to use extension to extension calls and benefit from that identification, and you'd still be able to present that CLI outbound.
And on internal calls, as I understand it as well, you've got obviously the default one we've talked about with the predefined string of digits in front of an extension number, but from my experience of working in the control panel, there's the DDI element, right? Yes. So whereby, and I set this up for one of our partners recently, they had extensions, I don't know, it was something like extension 100 through to 150.
Yeah.
Each one of those subscribers, each one of those users in the office had a DDI number associated to it. So my understanding is that I can go through within the control panel and I can say extension number 100 is 01903927100, so on and so forth. Absolutely. And it's then that number that's presented to the iPECS Anywhere user when an internal call comes in from the office.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
I think the point being that I'm more likely to have your DDI number saved in my mobile phone contacts than obviously I wouldn't have that random digit string. But either way, if you've got an end user customer that doesn't work with DDI numbers, we use the default prefix. If we've got a customer that does have DDIs, we can work with that. But can we have say you've got an end user customer that you've got 20 extensions, 5 of them don't have DDI numbers, could we have those 5 working with the default transforms, and then the other 15 or so working with DDI numbers, right?
Yeah,
so we
can have those two things into
okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
but for those that are not very familiar with the service, what we've just talked about might have been they see our mouths moving but don't necessarily follow everything we said. Yeah. But I guess the point here is the summary is this is all about at the very basic level. This is about managing the iPECS Anywhere user's experience when it comes to calls that are made to them from the office. I get there's a whole bunch of other CLI management stuff going on here, but this is about making the service sing with regards to when I get a call from the office. It's much clearer to me that A, it's a call coming from the office, but we can go down to the next level, which is B, who actually from the office is calling me.
Absolutely.
Which is, because we're obviously talking about this extending iPECS Cloud to your mobile users. What we're using the transforms for is to make that experience as seamless and as close to them sitting at a desk with a desk phone we can get.
That's exactly it. Yeah, and we keep going back to this extension of the Anywhere service into the mobile world. Yeah. And the transform service essentially just allows you to keep that familiarity. To say, okay, yes, this is a mobile device. Yes, it might have a mobile number attached to it. But actually, what I see on inbound and outbound calls is what I'm familiar with in my desk environment. And
so one more thing on the transforms, and this is kind of testing my knowledge here, which you'd hope I'm kind of familiar with this. There's one more, isn't there, called ranges. Now, my understanding of ranges is, say for example, you've got a support team.
Yes.
And within that support team, you've got extension 1000 to 1010.
Yeah.
But I think it doesn't have to be a consecutive range, does it?
You can do multiple ranges and things. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But I guess the point here is, say you've got an internal sales team, but then you've got the sales manager who's out and about. He might be getting she might be getting calls from that team. So we would use the ranges there so that if anybody within that internal sales team makes a call out, we're then saying present, because that sales team might have their own DDI number, for example.
Exactly. So they present a single consistent identity. So what they might have is a sales team with a single DDI which acts as a hunt group. So somebody calls into that number, anybody in that team can pick that up. Yeah. Now what would happen when they make an outbound call is it would present that same DDI. Yeah. So if somebody answers it, they'll be able to recognise it. Yeah. But equally, if they call that number back, it might not route through to the individual who made the initial call, but it'll route through back into that team.
But again, this is about extending and maintaining a very similar look and feel to iPECS Cloud for a mobile remote lone worker as they would do if they were just calling into the platform as standard.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
One of the main benefits of the Anywhere service is the fact that you can replicate on a mobile device what you do in your office environment. So if you have hunt groups or you have particular teams of individuals who have an incoming DDI specifically for their team, you can replicate that and you can present that as an outbound, as an outbound, view to the world. And so, from a user's perspective, again, we keep on going back to this consistency of experience and consistency of what the product does. What we're doing here is making sure that people just have that same identity available to them, whether they are using their desk device, whether they're using their mobile device, or whether they're set up to use both.
Yeah, and I guess ultimately it comes back to this point again of if we're rolling out iPECS Anywhere to these users, we want to make sure that if we're talking about extending iPECS Cloud to those users, that it is as seamless as possible, right? This is all about enhancing their experience, making sure that what they interact with, what they see, what they feel in terms of the service is consistent, and that when somebody does call them from the office, it appears like their mobile suddenly becomes like one of our 1,000i IP phones.
Absolutely.
It's not got all the buttons and whizziness on it, but it's still presenting a call.
It's presenting exactly the same format, and that's really what the Transform service is all about. It's just ensuring that consistency of experience, consistency of approach, and consistency of identity.
Awesome. Well, I think that's all the questions I had. Have we missed anything?
I don't think we have. I mean, as I say, I think we talked earlier about control panel and about what people can see in there. I think from a reseller's perspective, seeing the Transform service set up and seeing it actually in operation, there probably will be a light bulb moment at that point.
You've taken the words out of my mouth. I think I've recently done a handful of direct sort of one-to-one sessions for some of our partners, and the reason for doing that is getting people used to and familiar with the service anyway, but it is about that light bulb moment, because again we keep coming back to this point of it's about extending iPECS Cloud out to these users, but it's things like number transforms which make that happen.
Absolutely. It's a powerful element.
My point is, I guess we go back to this data capture form we have at the moment. If we're not putting these number transforms in place, we're not extending that look and feel to those users. So we're saying don't sell it as a standard mobile solution, but actually if you don't put these number transforms in place, you kind of are just selling it as a standard mobile service, right?
It's a powerful element which is actually
and
key.
one that we also, again, it's not chargeable.
Exactly,
it's part of the service,
part of the service.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right, and it's one of these things, as I say, that's actually pretty key in terms of the differentiation.
Yeah.
If you go to your high street store and you buy an EE phone or a Vodafone phone, how easy is it to change the CLI device? It's nigh on impossible.
Exactly, and I think I've personally had conversations with a number of partners whereby, and we talked about this earlier on, right? You invest a lot of time, money, and effort from both a business partner and their customer's perspective in buying into iPECS Cloud and all the key features and functions and business benefits you can derive from that, but then we go and deploy their remote mobile workers on a completely separate business mobile service. It's like, well, hang on a second, so they're not going to get any benefits in terms of being able to identify who's calling unless they've got everybody's number stored in their phone. They're certainly not going to get any benefits from if I've got call analytics, our iPECS analytics product, or call recording deployed to their office users. How do you extend that to a bunch of mobile users on Vodafone? You don't.
Absolutely,
right?
no. Absolutely. No.
Good. Okay, so that's number transforms done then. I think onwards and upwards to our next video. So join us again soon. We'll change, make a little bit doing it on separate days. Thanks, David.
Perfect. Cheers, Andy.